Hey everybody, I'm Stanley.
I'm Calvin.
And we're making this video to give some advice about the Twilight Cup based on our own experiences at our local tournament.
This video, the way it's going to work, the first half is going to be more of the meta, what we saw, a little bit of team building advice, what you can expect to see when you compete. And then the second half, both of us screen recorded all of our battles, so we're going to play some of those for you and give a little bit of a commentary. So to start our look into the meta, there is no one Pokemon like there was in Boulder Cup that you absolutely just have to have on your team to make it work. In the Boulder Cup, it was Skarmory. Now, there isn't a Skarmory, but there are several things that you have to at least consider. Now, the three big ones are Toxicroak, Azumarill, and Venomoth. We'll get into those in a little bit. We're about to break the meta down into 4 main points. The first of those 4 points, it's one of those 3. He deserves his own. It's Toxicroak.
Yep, so Toxicroak has his own spot here because he's so good in this cup. He's got a diverse move pool with Counter, Poison Jab as his fast moves, and then Mud Bomb, Sludge Bomb, and Dynamic Punch as his charge moves. And there's a lot of options there with how you want to do it. Counter does good neutral damage against a lot of things, has good damage, good energy gain. Poison Jab has also very good energy gain and can hit the fairy types like Azumarill for super effective. So both very viable options. And then for his charge moves, Mud Bomb, Sludge Bomb, and Dynamic Punch, there's some options there as well. But I think Mud Bomb you have to take for sure.
Yep. The reason that Mud Bomb is so important, it's a ground type move. Ground is super effective against all the poison types that you're going to see in this cup, and there will be a lot of them. In this entire cup, there are, I believe, 5 Pokemon that can learn ground type moves, and Toxicroak kind of fills the sweet spot right in the middle. There are 2 smaller moves that can be learned by Grimer, which actually, I guess it's also Mud Bomb, and Alolan Marowak, Bone Club. They'll charge plenty quick, but either the Pokemon or the move itself just doesn't fill all the criteria that you're really looking for. Grimer, it's a huge dust cost. He doesn't max out above, it's very low. And Ninetales, or Alolan Marowak, just the typing isn't very good with the Ghost. And then there's the 2 Nidos that have Earthquake, and it's just too hard to make that work. Whereas Toxicroak, the Mud Bomb, you can charge it quickly, you can use it a lot, super effective. It's what you want.
Yep. So definitely Mud Bomb, and then the other moves are kind of up to you based on what your team needs or what you think you need for coverage. I went with Sludge Bomb on mine because it's a good, very good move. It's super effective against the fairy types like Azumarill, which, like we said, you have to consider Azumarill because a lot of people brought it. So I thought having a poison type move on him was beneficial. Dynamic Punch is a really good move too. Hits a lot of stuff for neutral damage, but I went with Sludge Bomb. So
getting into the second of the 4 points, the next category is the Toxicroak counters. That's going to be the 2 Moths, Venomoth and Dustox, and the 2 Bats, Golbat and Crobat.
Yep. So we'll start with Venomoth. He recently got buffed, both Confusion and Silverwind. Confusion does more damage now. Silverwind now has a 10% chance to raise its attack and defense, which is huge. So Venomoth is a really, really popular option. Confusion can take down a Toxicroak in just 4 hits. So with Toxicroak being as common and as popular as it is, Venomoth is a really, really solid counter for it. For his charge moves, like I said, Silverwind is probably the better of its bug moves and has that chance of raising his stats. And Psychic is his other one, which Psychic is not a great move, but it will give you a lot of good coverage. So that's what I ended up taking with mine.
You'll find a use for it every now and
then. Dustox, really similar role to Venomoth, can get Confusion. He's tankier than Venomoth, which is why some people chose to take him. But a few things make it hard to pick. Primarily the dust cost. He does not get to 1500 CP. You have to max it out. You need a good high IV one. Because he's tankier, has slightly less attack also. So it'll take 5 Confusion to take down a Toxicroak instead of 4.
Dustox also has a poison move that you can unlock, a poison charge move. Whereas if you want to try to get a poison charge move on Venomoth, you need a legacy move, which obviously not everyone has. So that's another reason some people prefer Dustox over Venomoth. Moving on to the 2 Bats, there's Golbat and Crobat. Both of us personally preferred Golbat, and that's what we found largely to be the case. The difference really is they can both learn a flying quick attack, or quick move. Um, Golbats has slightly less damage and slightly more energy gain, um, and we just prefer that slightly increased energy gain. Help you get the charge moves off faster.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, the next big category is the poison and dark tanks. They all serve kind of generally the same role. Usually they're fairly safe leads. There aren't a whole lot of things that counter them. Those Pokemon are Skuntank, Drapion, Alolan Muck, Swalot, and Umbreon. Now, because they're kind of similar roles, I only brought one in my team of 6. I brought Skuntank. Stanley, however...
I decided to take 2 of them. Like we said, they all are really similar, but they have slightly different move sets. So I chose to take both Alolan Muck and Skuntank. And because they both serve similar roles, it wouldn't make sense to have them both with just Poison and Dark moves. So my Muck had Snarl, Dark Pulse, Gunk Shot. So he's got the Poison and Dark coverage there. And then my Skuntank had Poison Jab as a fast move with Flamethrower and Sludge Bomb. So Flamethrower I thought was a really good option on him because it hits the Moss for super effective damage. It can hit a lot of the other Pokemon in the field for neutral damage, which Poison or Crunch couldn't do, for example, if you were against another Poison Dark tank. So I thought having those options was really helpful to give you more diversity, more coverage for different types. And so when you're trying to pick your Poison and Dark tank, you can take those moves into consideration based on what your team needs, what kind of things you're weak to. Swalot can get Ice Beam. Umbreon can get Last Resort. His other moves are both dark, so if you want to use Umbreon, you definitely want to find a Last Resort one from Community Day, because that'll just give you... it'll help you do better in a lot of the neutral matchups. And Drapion has the option of Aqua Tail, which... is very fast charging. It's good for breaking shields.
Moving on to our 4th and final category, this is really the best of the rest. So all of these Pokemon have some specific role that they fill.
Yep. Okay. So to start out this category, we'll talk about Azumarill. Azumarill seems like it wouldn't be a good option because he's weak to poison, which is obviously super common in the Twilight Cup. But he's just so bulky and has really good moves that he can take those poison hits. He can hit a lot of things back for good damage. And if you're not adequately prepared for it, it can really mess up a team. One of my personal matches, the team of 3 I picked it didn't have a good answer for Azumarill, and it's basically the reason I lost that match, which we'll show that later. We'll talk about that more. But it was a super popular option just because a lot of people had it prepped already for general Great League use before Silpharina put out these Silpharina Cups. So Azumarill is something you definitely have to prepare for. I think that's 21 of the 29 participants at our local tournament had Azumarill on their team of 6. So,
yep. Next up is Tentacruel. Now, Tentacruel's main purpose, the thing that it's the best at, is specifically to counter Azumarill. Tentacruel will resist any move that Azumarill can use against it. It's water and poison, so it'll resist Azumarill's Bubble Water quick move. It'll resist Ice Beam. It'll resist its Fairy type charge move, the Hydro Pump that it can learn, all of it. Not doing a whole lot of damage while Tentacruel's doing a super effective Poison Jab damage back to it. Additionally, all 3 of Tentacruel's possible charge moves are 1 bar. They're big moves. It'll take a long time to charge them up, but once they hit, they'll hit for a lot of damage. Now, that being said, a lot of people choose to use... The reason to use Tentacruel, aside from just wanting to counter Azumarill, is you want a closer. You want something that's going to come in at the end and just knock out whatever the opponent has left. The problem with that is, if your opponent is able to save their shield, or they happen to have a bad matchup, your Tentacruel happens to have a bad matchup, maybe their last Pokemon is Venomoth, which is going to be doing super effective damage again with the Confusion. Because of things like that, I couldn't justify bringing it on my team of 6. I was worried that I wasn't going to be going into it as many Azumarill, so I wouldn't have that good counter for it, or I wouldn't need that good counter for it, or really it was just play testing before the tournament started. I wasn't wild about it. I preferred other things. I didn't take it.
Next up, things you might see, Alolan Ninetales. He's just pretty useful in general. He's good against the poison types. He can take down the bats and Venomoth. Um, his moves, he gets Powder Snow as his fast move, which is good damage, really good energy gain. And then for his charge moves, Psyshock was recently added to his move pool, which is going to hit those poison types and Venomoth and the bats for super effective damage. So he's definitely got good coverage. He can hit those common things. His other moves, Ice Beam and Dazzling Gleam, are debatable. They both have good Pokemon or good uses, but Dazzling Gleam does take a while to charge up, so you have to consider that.
Next one up is Quillfish. Personally, this is one of my favorites. I took Quillfish and I used him in 2/3 of all my matches. So Quillfish is a pretty solid lead. That's how I used him, I think, every time. The only real trouble that I had was when I went into an Alolan Ninetales because of the Psyshock. If you're taking Quillfish, you need to have Water Gun as your quick move and Aqua Tail as one of your charge moves. The reason for that is the water typing is going to hit neutral on a large number of the things that you're going to be fighting, and Water Gun is going to charge up Aqua Tail incredibly quickly, which is what makes him a good shield breaker. His other options for the second charge move are Ice Beam and Sludge Bomb. I always get those two mixed up. The larger poison move. I took the poison move over Ice Beam. I wanted him to have that extra threat, especially into Azumarill, which happened a couple times. It allows you to play that mind game of charging them both up. Which one are you going to use? I was happy with it.
Next up, Tyranitar. Tyranitar is not one that you usually think of as being good in Great League, which is true. But in Twilight Cup, where you're restricted to certain types, he resists both Poison and Dark, which are obviously the most common types that we've seen. So his huge attack stat plus those resistances means he's actually a pretty solid generalist in the Twilight Cup. You definitely need Smackdown. It was recently buffed. It does good damage against a lot of the field. It hits Venomoth and the bats super effective. He's a really good counter against those. And then Stone Edge and Crunch do a lot of good damage too. Like I said, he just has a huge attack stat, so he hits everything pretty hard. He does struggle against Azumarill. He really struggles against counter Toxicroak, or Toxicroak in general. But I think he's definitely a solid option.
Next up, Alolan Eradicate. This actually serves a pretty similar role to Quillfish in that it's a good shield breaker. You want to have Quick Attack and then Crunch and Hyper Fang as its two charge moves. Hyper Fang charges very quickly. Crunch charges even a little faster than that. With your Hyper Fang, it's a normal type move. You're going to get off good chunks of neutral damage against almost anything you fight against. The only thing you really have to look out for is Toxicroak with its fighting move and bug type poison moves on the moths. Other than that, you've got at least a decent matchup into whatever you're up against.
Next up is Venusaur. Venusaur is strong here because of his move pool. He's got really good moves. He's Razor Leaf and Vine Whip fast moves. Razor Leaf does good damage. Vine Whip does less damage but has better energy gain, so both solid options. Fast moves, you definitely want Frenzy Plant, so you want a Community Day one if you have access to that. And then I took Sludge Bomb, or I would have taken Sludge Bomb, just for that poison coverage. Poison's a pretty useful type in this cup. And Frenzy Plant is going to hit a lot of things for neutral damage, charges really fast, good damage for energy. Just a solid move in general. So he counters Azumarill and Quillfish. Again, Azumarill is one of the most common. Quillfish was fairly common. So having a grass type could be useful in this cup, depending on who you go against.
And our last Pokemon on this list is Sableye. Now, Sableye is interesting for a number of reasons. First off, for us at least, we didn't see very many of them. When we were training before the cup, I didn't fight against a single one, I don't think.
Yeah, no, me either.
Yeah. And part of why it's so rare is because, similar to Dustox, even a perfect one will max out below 1500 CP. So if you're going to take one, you need one with good IVs, and you have to put a lot of dust into it to max it out. Now, the other interesting part is its typing. It's Ghost and Dark, which means it only has one weakness, and that's to fairy types, which a lot of people presumably won't bring as many of because of all the poison types out there. You'll see maybe Azumarill, Alolan Ninetales, maybe one or two others. If you do find yourself against Sableye, you want to know the move so you're prepared. You can learn its quick move is going to be Shadow Claw. That was recently buffed. It's a really good move. Its three options for charge moves are Foul Play, which is Dark type, fairly low energy, can get off pretty quick. Shadow Sneak, Ghost type move, also fairly low energy, comes at you a lot. And the Rock type move, Power Gem. Power Gem is probably going to be taken by most people that bring one just to deal with moths and bats. And the real draw to Sableye, other than its few weaknesses, is that it wins a lot of matchups. There aren't a ton of things that it smashes, like the moths and bats, sorry. But it's going to at least beat pretty much anything. So just really be aware if you find one. It's probably got a slight edge in whatever the matchup is, and if you can, use those fairy moves. So in our tournament, of the 29 people, we only saw one person bring a Sableye. Now, that one person won the whole thing, so shout out Andrew the Nerd. Congrats, man.
Yeah, so these aren't all the possible Pokemon you're going to see, but this list is what we think is going to be the most viable and what you're most likely to run into. So one factor for that is your local meta. Each area might have their own unique meta based on biome, what you can find readily in the wild. Just preferences. If you notice, everyone that you practice against is using a certain Pokemon, you're going to start thinking how to counter it, and you're going to want to bring your own counter to that. So every tournament's going to be a little different. You're going to see some different things, but I think this is a pretty good list of the most viable ones.
So that's been our look at the meta. We're going to continue on now with a few choice battles from our tournament. So here we go. I'm leading off my trusty Quillfish into an Azumarill. I'm pretty okay with this. I know my poison move is going to be super effective if I can get it off. So I begin charging up, and I want to get the poison move all the way up so I can try to bait out a shield. He gets his move off first. I decide to just take it because I know it's going to be not very effective. Now, I use Aqua Tail to try to bait out a shield. Unfortunately, he doesn't use a shield. Oh well. Here, I decide to shield because I want to make sure I survive so I can get my move off. I charge it up and use it. And the Sludge Wave is enough to take out his Azumarill. Next, he gets into Toxicroak, and here you can see how quickly that Aqua Tail charges up as I'm able to get one off. And I'm now able to equalize the shield, so I'm feeling pretty good. Unfortunately, I don't have a Toxicroak counter, so I send in my Toxicroak. And because we have even shields, he's going to be able to win this, no matter how I play it. So I shield his Mud Bomb, then he's about to shield mine. He uses his second one, and I'm left with just a little HP to get one hit off, and then I send in my Skuntank. He's able to get his Mud Bomb up again, uses it, takes a big chunk out of my health, and then I'm able to finish him off with the Poison Jab. With how low I am, I realize I have to just start spamming my Flamethrower. Fortunately, he puts in a Venomoth, and it's not quite enough to take it out, and he's able to get me with that one Confusion.
Okay, so the first match I chose, this was actually one of my losses, but I just want to show you guys maybe how I could have played it better, things I did wrong. So I lead with Tyranitar. It's a risky lead. I was hoping for a Poison Tank or a Moth, but it's Azumarill, unfortunately, which is not a good matchup. I decided to keep it in, just get that good smackdown damage. He does get a charge move off first, which I decide to shield. And then I use my Stone Edge, try to get some damage off, but he also decides to shield. So at this point, I decide to switch out to Toxicroak, try to get off a poison move, but he gets another charge move off before I can. So I make the mistake of not shielding. This takes out a huge chunk of my health. I do get a Sludge Bomb off here, but then he decides to shield that. So he's able to just take out Toxicroak with Bubble. At this point, I don't really have a good option. Neither one of these is going to be very good, so I send back in Tyranitar, try to get some more smackdowns, but he gets another charge move off. I don't shield that, it's not worth it to me. Send in Venomoth, and here he gets another charge move off, and I have to shield this one because Ice Beam's going to hurt. So kill it with Confusion. He sends in his own Venomoth. I wait to build up Psychic for the super effective damage and get that off. Takes out his Venomoth. And now his last Pokemon is Toxicroak, which is a good matchup for me, but unfortunately Even though Venomoth can kill Toxicroak in 4 hits, Toxicroak will get a charge move off, and he narrowly takes the victory. So this battle really showcases my point from earlier that you have to prepare for Azumarill. If I had played better and used my shield against the play rough on my Toxicroak, I might have done better in this matchup. But Toxicroak was my only Azumarill counter on that team, so I really needed to make sure that he did his job and took out the Azumarill.
So in this clip, I lead with my Toxicroak. I was hoping that he would lead a Poison Dark, but that's not how it turned out. He also led a Toxicroak. So I'm going to use a few quick attacks, and then this is a strategy you can use. I switch into my Golbat as I know his charge move is about to come up. Usually when this happens, they've already selected their charge move before knowing what Pokemon you're switching into. So I take not very effective damage from that. He switches into his Venomoth, and now we're trading super effective quick attacks with each other. I like Air Cutter on Golbat just because it can do super effective damage to both Venomoth and Toxicroak. He shields it here and then is able to outdamage me. I send in my Azumarill. He has a move ready to go. I decide not to block it because it's not going to be very effective. I don't take a whole lot of damage, and then am able to finish him off with my bubble. He sends in Skuntank. I use Play Rough instead of Ice Beam here to get the stab attack bonus on the damage. Does a good chunk. I see that my moves are almost charged up, so I decide to shield his. The Crunch wouldn't have done a whole lot, but I wanted to play it safe. I use my Ice Beam here. He blocks it. My Azumarill goes down, but my Toxicroak is able to finish it off with just a counter or two, and those counters are enough to charge up my Mud Bomb so I can finish off his Toxicroak when it comes back in. And that's the match.
For my final matchup here, we both end up leading with Poison Dark tanks. I have my Muck and he has a Skuntank. At the beginning, we're both attacking, just kind of feeling out the damage, seeing how much we do. And he gets a charge move off first. I decide not to shield here. Thankfully, it wasn't a flamethrower. It's a crunch, which doesn't do too much. I go for the gunk shot. I'm assuming he won't shield because I didn't shield, and he doesn't. So the higher base damage gunk shot does a good amount to his Skuntank. He gets another charge move off here. I decide to shield because I know I'll kill him with a couple more fast attacks, and then I'll have a charge move ready for whatever comes in next. So he sends in a Muck. I should have went for the gunk shot here. I didn't think it was going to be ready, so I clicked Dark Pulse instead. Does a little bit of damage, and then he finishes me off with a few more snarls. So here I send in Toxicroak. Counter's doing pretty decent damage. He does have another charge move ready before me. I decide to shield here, keep the Toxicroak healthy, and he switches out into a Golbat, and I switch into my Azumarill. So he gets a charge move off first. I don't have any shields left, but it doesn't do too much damage. And go for the Ice Beam. I assume he's going to shield here, and he does. And he gets another charge move ready. Shadow Ball again. I live with just a sliver of health, which lets me get off another Ice Beam. So this eats up his last shield. And my Toxicroak has a move ready from earlier, so immediately switch in, use the Sludge Bomb. Almost kills it, and then he gets another charge move off here. Poison Fang. I assume he didn't have the Shadow Ball ready, so he had to go Poison Fang to get the damage. And then he sends his Muck back in. My Mud Bomb is ready, and I'm able to take him out and take the match.
Thank you guys for watching. This has been our overview of the Twilight Cup. Hopefully it's helpful to you guys if you still have an upcoming tournament, and you can find the links to our tournament results in the description below.
Yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed our video. This was our first one, so we will take any feedback or suggestions you might have. You can leave those in the comments. As you've probably seen, the next Silpharina Cup has been announced, the Tempest Cup. So we're ready to dive into that. We'll have a video out for you soon, so stay tuned.